Hi, I'm Joel H. Brewster, and I'm no stranger to horror. And this is a podcast where I talk about the big and small of the horror genre with the hopes to take you from, actually, this episode's a little different. Today with me, I have a casual horror fan. And over the past, let's say a couple months here, we've been friends and I've been trying to convert my friend Anna Jo into being a full-blown horror film fanatic like myself. So today we'll be talking about the 2015 film The Invitation, directed by Karyn Kusama. And I can't wait to hear Anna's thoughts on this movie. Hello, Anna. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? I'm excited to be here.
So, as a casual horror fan, I've got some horror fan questions. So, what made you get into horror kind of like later into life, I'd say?
Yeah, I came to horror very late in life. I'm 30. No, I'm just kidding. It never really occurred to me that the movies that I was watching, what the genre was. I'll be honest. I kind of would go through and just look at the movie, look about, what people were saying about it and watch it. Never really kind of cluing into what genre I was watching. So that's why, yeah, I'm a pretty casual. Do you call yourself cinephiles? Is that a thing?
Yeah, cinephiles is a thing.
Yeah, so I don't know any of the terminology or anything like that. I'm really kind of fast and loose, but I really, really love movies. So yeah, I guess I don't even know what movies I started watching that were horror. I guess one of them would be like, is Coraline technically horror? This is the thing. I don't really know what genres movies are.
See, Coraline was supposed to be a kid's movie. I say supposed to be because when I watched Coraline, I was an adult, but it is scary. Like it has that Tim Burton-esque look to it that it is scary.
Yeah. So I guess I just have this thing of I'll watch a movie, I'll fervently love it, but then I don't really like remember or pay attention to those types of details. I'm just really kind of immersed with the story the story and what the person who made it is conveying. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you didn't really grow up, because I know you personally outside of this. I know you've told me that you didn't really grow up around watching movies as much, correct?
No. Yeah, no. For me, my whole thing is like, if again, this kind of plays into me being kind of fast and loose. Yeah, I just really didn't grow up watching movies. I grew up in a conservative household. So I don't know if people can relate to that, but when you do, in certain religions, you're not really allowed to watch certain TV. So if there's ever a classic movie that someone's seen, my kind of thing that I always say to people is like, if it's a classic, I haven't seen it. So I kind of have to, it's interesting because all the things that were like, those movies when you were growing up where everyone had seen it. And so they would quote the lines to each other and things like that.
Yeah, they become like part of like the social conversation across the
exactly board. Yeah. So I feel a little bit like an outsider in that sense. So I like hearing about why someone likes a movie just one-on-one, I guess, not because it's a movie that everyone's watching, but more like, if someone says like, I really love this movie and here's why, then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch it now, but it is kind of strange. Like I don't have that type of repertoire of like vocabulary around movies that other people do. So, but can I swear on this?
Of course you can. Yeah.
Okay. I really fucking love movies. Yeah.
This is like just a thing I'm just going to add in here. So Anna and I are co-workers, and one thing that it's funny that you said, can I swear? I haven't really heard you swear before, so this is really funny.
You haven't?
No.
Are you serious?
No.
You're lying.
No,
really?
Not really. No, because like usually in like work environments, office environments, people don't usually swear. So it's just funny.
I mean, I don't know if have I heard you swear? I don't know.
I don't think so.
We had to kind of like toe that line,
Yeah, right.
Also, Joel, just an aside, I'm gonna crack my cider.
Yeah, that's completely fair. And if anyone's listening to this, feel free to take this moment to also crack your cider as well.
Yeah, let's kick back and relax. I'm gonna crack it into the mic. I don't know if this is gonna be ASMR or mildly triggering for people. That's fine too. Okay, here we go.
It was ASMR.
Was it really?
Yeah, it really worked out.
Okay, cheers everybody. Cheers. We're doing this pretty early, I'll be honest, but I said to Joel, I was like, listen, are there any rules in a pandemic setting?
There isn't, and it's my first morning podcast, so I'm very excited for this.
Okay, all right.
So do you remember, because you said like later in life you're like just getting caught up now, and like are you getting caught up in classic movies or just watching like kind of the newer modern classics with films now?
Yeah, I mean, okay. I guess for me, I'm getting back into it because, or not even getting back into it. I just didn't have like a social group that was connected to movies. So I really take this on. I don't know if anyone else does this, but it's like a very solitary endeavor. So I don't really actually seek out classic movies. I kind of go with like what type of mood I'm in and try to find a movie that is on the same vibe, I guess. And then also like you, Joel, when we're at work and you have like a movie or a show that you recommend to me, or you say like, I really like this. That's kind of how I would go about it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of just, I guess I kind of just fall into movies, I guess. And then not really realizing, honestly, Joel, until we started talking about it, being like, oh, wow, I really have seen a lot of movies and I really enjoy them, you know?
Yeah, because you have one thing I really like about your taste in movies and your style of watching movies is that once you like something, you seem to watch it over and over again. I think it's something that people can relate to a lot.
I know. Is that weird?
No, not at all. I for me, what I do is I think what I do is a little weirder. I'll watch scenes from a movie over and over again. So if there's like a scene that I'm like, oh, that was really good, I'll try to find that scene on YouTube and watch that over and over again. And like throughout the day, yeah, I'll watch a same scene like over and over again.
That's really cool. Can you tell me more? Like, so, like, tell me about one scene that you really enjoy, if you can.
Okay, so there's a number of different scenes from the movie, and this is like not the hugest. Well, it's a big movie, but Sherlock Holmes, Game of Shadows, the second Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr. I've watched like a number of those slow-mo scenes just over and over again.
Like the boxing scenes, or no?
That's in the first one. I've watched that scene over and over again. But like there's a scene where they're running through the forest and everything's getting shot up by cannons, I believe. I've watched that scene about 1,000 times. Like I've watched it like 1,000 times. There's a couple of different too. Get Out, which was the episode I did, my previous episode on this podcast. I've watched this Fall into the Sunken Place scene. I think I watched that like 100 times. I've watched that a bunch. So there's a lot of different scenes I've casually just watched over and over again, some from writing perspective. There's also, not to plug these people because I don't know them, but there's a YouTube channel called Screenplayed. I think it's, Screenplayed. And they have it where they show you what the scene matches up with the screenplay itself. And I love watching those because I love to see how the screenplay and the actual what happened on screen like looks like. Because that's always really fun to do.
That is really cool. And that's something like you've kind of gotten me. Yeah, I guess I don't know what word to use to describe, my style of interacting with movies, but I guess I never really thought about screenplays before. And you've kind of introduced me to the fact that every single movie has a screenplay. It's very important, obviously. And so that concept of how, because there's so many different artists involved, there's writers and then there's visual artists and there's actors. And it's so interesting to think about how like the writer's vision and then the director's vision, if they're different people, is different,
Yeah. And even coming down to, and this will definitely pivot right into this film, even coming down to how the film's marketed can change absolutely everything about like how the film is perceived.
Yes.
And what happened with, because Karyn Kusama, who did this movie, The Invitation from 2015, previous to this did the 2009 movie, Jennifer's Body, which I've also covered on this podcast.
Yeah.
And the marketing of Jennifer's Body really kind of ruins the film itself, like what they tried to do there. And then it, from my understanding and from what I've heard on other podcasts, what I've heard in other stories, Karyn Kusama, when she had the movie come out, because it didn't relate well, it kind of hurt her in that way, from my understanding. And now on The Invitation, when they shot this indie film, they actually had full creative control. And even down to like, it wasn't as big, but, if you haven't seen the movie, anyone listening, I recommend going to watch it on, it's on Netflix right now. It's a phenomenal movie. It's beautifully art house, and it couldn't be more different than Jennifer's Body. They're like night and day. Like her work in both these films is brilliant and very beautiful, but they couldn't be like two different. They're the most different movies I've ever seen in someone's career back to back anyways.
She is, you know what I kept thinking about when I was watching this movie is that she is fucking brilliant. Like the way this movie is shot is so pivotal to how it makes you feel, you know? And I was just wondering, like, okay, so the word that I was thinking about to describe what I kind of was trying to say earlier is I think I'm a little bit illiterate when it comes to describing how I feel about movies and all the different words that are used. So I love when you use words and you start describing movies because I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. And I was just wondering if you know whether she has done any interviews to talk about what happened with Jennifer's body, because I think it's important. And kind of what she, like, has she had an interview where she's explained from her side how that went down, like how the marketing went so awry when they were really objectifying Megan Fox and things like that?
I believe there is, and I'll put some in the show notes. I just can't think of them offhand, but I've heard from different people that there is interviews. I just haven't seen them personally. But I will find some more material on that and put in the show notes because I'd also like to see some more about that. I've heard about Diablo Cody's response to it, and her response to the marketing was pretty jarring. And I guess.
Can you tell me more about Diablo Cody?
Yeah, Diablo Cody is the screenwriter of Jennifer's Body. She famously wrote Juno and a number of different things.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's such a good writer. I was actually at a panel once where she was, and it was she was amazing. She was really interactive, spoke to a lot of people in the crowd. Definitely a writer that like I kind of idolize as far as dialogue goes. There's a lot of writers that really inspire the same sort of the fast talking kind of awkwardness of dialogue that I really love.
Same, Joel. I love that awkward. Speaking as an awkward person myself, I have extremely high anxiety. So I love it's so therapeutic to watch that awkward, jarring humor dialogue. So that's sick.
Right. See, this is why I chose this movie for us to go over on this podcast. Because one, like I wanted to have someone on the show that was like a casual horror fan, but also this film, because from our conversations, I feel like we have the same sort of like awkwardness and like anxiety towards certain things. And this movie to me was, I think it would be like classified as a thriller, but it was a horror movie to me because of the awkwardness of the entire thing made my skin crawl. And I was like, oh, Anna's going to feel the same way. Because when they're at the table, when they're in the house, going to that situation, I was like, that's my nightmare. All this was my nightmare of a situation.
So honestly, dude, I was writing notes when I was doing this. And the whole time I was like, this is genius because I feel like such an outsider at dinner parties. I don't understand how to act at all. And so I thought I was thinking the exact same thing. I was like, this is going to be so interesting to talk about how they've used like the awkwardness of a dinner party for myself. I know there's people out there who go to dinner parties and they're like, this is amazing. I'm having a great time, but that's not really my vibe.
Yeah.
So to feel, I just thought that was so, I don't know if that's like what their intention was, but it really played into, I don't know, for me, how I experienced the story. Cause I just was thinking about how when I'm at a dinner party, I feel so fucking awkward and I don't know what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to feel, that kind of thing. And then to tie that in with it's a fucking, well, I don't know. Can I give spoilers? Yeah,
everyone that's listening to this, be spoiler ready. Like I said, the movie is on Netflix. I recommend pausing this and going to watch the movie. It's such a good movie, and I feel like not enough people have seen it. Please continue.
I agree. I totally agree, and I would add to that. Go watch it. Come back. Kick back. If you drink, crack yourself a drink. If you don't drink, make yourself a tea. Make yourself a coffee. Come hang out. Because this movie is great. This movie is great.
It is. Yeah, you're I cut off your train of thought there and I apologize.
That's okay. Honestly, sometimes I need help remembering what my train of thought was, Joel. So what was I saying?
You're just going about like how the film itself is like kind of it felt awkward, like it's, and you felt awkward like just watching it too because you didn't.
Yes. Yeah. So okay, and also I thought the main actor, like our protagonist, what's that actor's name? Sorry.
Logan Marshall Green's that actor's name.
Okay, Logan Marshall Green did such a great job of being and maybe you can speak to what this is called, Joel, but the person who is the audience, basically. What would you call that?
Well, he's like the audience perspective because I felt like him too. The whole time
Yes.
I felt like I was like, oof, I relate to this guy a lot.
Absolutely. Because he's the only one being like, this is fucking weird. Like,
Yeah.
why are we doing this? And I just felt that that really tied into sometimes when you go to dinner parties where in groups of friends, like you love your friends, but there's certain groups of friends where there's something big or awkward that no one's talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a very common experience, I think, with people. And so to kind of twist that and then make it about something else is such a genius, I think a genius horror device, really. You
Yeah.
know?
And one thing I really thought that this movie is a perfectly timed for like when this episode's going to come out, as well as like where we are right now,
Mhm.
is that this movie is a perfect after the pandemic movie. Because I feel like there's going to be a number of these, hey, we haven't seen each other in 2 years. We haven't seen each other in a while, sort of party situations where
Mhm.
something's happened, friends haven't seen each other, but they're excited to see each other because the like pandemic's over, right? I'm
Yeah.
not saying the pandemic's over for anyone listening to this just yet, but
I think
it will be
everyone
over.
thought that you meant the pandemic was completely over. You heard it here first.
It's
Joel
over.
Brewster is claiming. I do a pull quote and write an article. Joel Brewster claims pandemic is completely over.
Just gets the show canceled. But that's what this movie felt like. It felt like it was like what the world will feel like after the pandemic, with a bunch of awkward friendships that have
Yeah.
kind of not slidden away, but they haven't talked in a while. Especially if something big's happened between the groups of
Trauma.
friends.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trauma. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought this movie, rewatching it now, was good, and also with someone that hadn't seen the movie before, like yourself. That's why I
Mhm.
wanted to hear your perspective on it.
You know what, Joel? I have seen this movie before.
Oh, no way.
And I'll tell you more. I'm telling you, and I'm just gonna say this might just make me a weirdo, but I am very strange. Um, I honestly, the way it is such a solitary endeavor for me to interact with movies. I'm telling you, because I had no one in my life who was into that. And so I was pretty honestly coming from a pretty lonely place. And I think that's why I have such a passion for movies, because yeah, it's just such a solitary thing for me. And so when I found the invitation, I think I probably watched it fairly close to when it came out,
Oh,
because
okay.
my way of finding movies would be like, I'm feeling this way this evening alone in my bed, alone in my bed. And then I would, go online and be like, look up indie movies that had like good reviews and stuff. And it's probably not a great way to find movies, but honestly, it makes me find movies that I would never watch otherwise. Um, and this one, of course, had really good critical reception, but I think it should have had even more.
Me too. I
Yeah.
definitely think so. And yeah, I definitely think so. Because I feel like if it would have leaned in maybe harder to the horror element, maybe it would have. But I don't think it should have. I think it was perfect how it was. But
Okay.
I feel like I don't know, maybe it was a marketing thing, but for whatever reason, this wasn't as big as it should have been. But I love
Okay.
talking about this movie with people that have seen it because
Yeah.
it's kind of hidden that way.
Yeah. So, okay, can you tell me more about why you think if it leaned, okay, so why would it have gotten better critical reception if it leaned more into horror, do you think?
Because I think that if you lean more into I think that people themselves need broad stuff a lot of the times. There's a lot of like when broad comedies come out as opposed to like kind of like more subtle humor. The broader
Mm.
comedies, a lot of the time, if they're well done, those will be the ones that get like more attention. If it's a broader horror that they can just pitch it as a like broader horror, put more like blood on the poster and such. I feel
Okay.
like this may have gotten more, maybe not the same critical reception because I think as it was as a thriller, it worked out better. But I think
Yeah.
that it would have been seen by more people for better or worse in that sense.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting.
But again, this was a horror movie for me because the awkwardness of a dinner party after not seeing people for 2 years is my actual nightmare. That's scarier to me than a
Oh
monster
God,
coming after me.
Joel, truly, I understand. I'm there with you.
Right? There's moments in this too that I'm like, oh, that's pretty much a jump scare to me. When when in the beginning of the movie, when Eden slaps the friend mid-sentence because he said something
Oh
offside to her, to
my
be Will's character
God.
would
Oh,
actually, I'd leave. I'd like, I have to go home.
but also,
Got
do you
weird.
feel that way because in your mind or in your bones, you think that that could happen at any time or something like
A
that? Because
hundred percent.
I knew it. I knew. I know. Because you're like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what that is. But you're always kind of like, this could happen. I don't know
Yeah.
what that is. Okay. Also, I want to talk about Eden
Mhm.
because, and what's that actress's name, Joel? Do you
Oh,
know?
I have to look. I can't think of it offhand, but keep talking. I'll find her
Okay,
name.
we got to look it up. So look
Yeah.
it up, because what I'm about to say is you heard it here first. You didn't hear this here first. I'm sure everyone's saying this. That fucking actress, dude, is so good. Because can I just say, I really related with Eden in a big way, in almost too big of a way,
Mhm.
which is good. But that actress, I feel like before every scene, she sobbed somewhere, like cried, and then came out and did the scene because she perfects this look that I can relate to in such a big way of I'm not okay at all, but I'm at a dinner party, so I'm gonna go quietly cry in the bathroom, come out and look fine and smile, but her face always looks like she's right on the edge of losing it. And
Yeah,
I just think that that is such an incredible, as an actress, to like nail that in that way is so impressive, you know?
I couldn't agree more. Tammy Blanchard's her name, and
Amy Blanchard.
yeah, yeah, there was a number of different moments here. Even after the slap, that the awkwardness of that, and just like she had tears in her eyes.
Ugh,
She was like had the like you said, always had like the tears in her eyes,
I'm
just like
telling you.
ready, and it was
Yeah.
yeah. She had such a good
Slightly
performance in this
shaky
movie.
lip, like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Another thing I noticed about this movie this time around, and maybe because Get Out's still fresh in my head, a lot of similarities to Get Out. Very similar opening
Oh
too.
my God, dude. It reminded me also of Us too. Did
Hmm.
you feel that?
Yeah, and just
I was
like,
gonna,
oh,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go, you go.
I was just going to say that there was an opening similar in the sense that an animal gets hit by a car on
Yeah.
the way up, right? The coyote gets hit on the way up in this film. A deer
Yeah.
gets hit by on the car and Get Out, and it's just like that similarity right away, just like stuck in my head. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. And then like kind of
Yes.
the culty aspect of both was just
Yes.
like really the same thing to me too. And the
I
seclusion of us is just yeah, that kind of feels like that way too.
there's I don't, and I guess I don't really know, but sometimes I just feel things, and there's something about the scene where he's lighting the lantern and the shots there with the house that reminded me of certain scenes in Us. And I don't know if I'm just remembering it wrong, but there was something about that, the spirit of that, the vibe of that, that also reminded me of that. So I find that interesting too. I wonder if those two artists are influenced by each other or not, you
One or
know?
two, because it's the movies themselves are quite different, but at the same time, there was like,
Totally.
yeah, they definitely had a similarity in that sense.
Yeah.
I remember I did listen to a podcast on with the writers on a show called Script Notes, not to promote another podcast on my podcast.
Oh, tell
But
me. Yeah.
what was really interesting was the ending scene with well not ending, but near the end with the lantern, hanging the lantern up there,
Yeah.
which like leads to something else later. There's a writing term called hanging a lantern on something, which means you'll show something and then later that'll like it'll come to light realistically. And they literally
Okay.
did that in this movie, and I thought that was like a really cool thing to
See, I love talking to you about this shit because that's the kind of stuff that I don't know about. And so I love talking because you're an expert, and hearing about those types of things is so cool to me. It's so cool. I'm
I
so
was
happy we talk about it.
Thank you. That was one of those things that when I saw it, because I believe I listened to that podcast before I'd actually seen the movie. So then when I
Okay.
watched the movie, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I was looking out for that part.
Yeah.
Um, and then, oh, yeah, this reminds me of another thing to get into.
Mhm.
Gaslighting in this movie is
Oh my God, Joel.
like a
I wrote this
masterclass.
down. I wrote
I
this
figured you
down.
did. I figured you did too. Because like, I bet you there was another thing. I was like, gaslighting in this movie. I was like, and we're gonna talk
How
about
did you
that.
know? This is so weird. Both things that you've just said, I was like, these are the things. I'm telling you, I wrote notes, and I was like, one of them was gaslighting. Like I even wrote. Sorry if you can hear me turning my pages,
That's
but
fine.
I wrote down what he fucking said, because also what's the Logan Marshall Green's character is named, what's his name?
Will.
Okay, so Will, and then who's Eden's partner?
Tammy Blanchard's character. Oh, Eden's partner is I think it was David. That's an actor named
David. Okay,
Michael Huson.
So David, I have so many thoughts about fucking David, dude. And also, okay, sorry, I'm just getting so excited. But there's a part where he pulls Will aside, and he's like, why are you doing this, man? Like, you gotta settle down. I don't know why you're so upset, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what kind of psychopath? What kind of psychopath? Like, on top of being part of a cult, I understand. Okay, there's that level. But why are you going to like gaslight this dude when he's right? And you know he's right.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, you just feel terrible. Again, a nightmare situation for me.
Love
Feeling
it.
like
Love
you're
that
losing
angle,
your
Joel.
mind, right? Like, it's like, isn't it though? Like feel like you're losing your mind, and everyone's
Absolutely.
like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, chill out, man. We understand. We're your friends. We love you."
Exactly.
But they're like not listening to you. That's like, it's my nightmare situation. That's the worst.
Absolutely. And also feels oddly familiar. You know how I talked to you about, and I think this might be, maybe you can put words to this as a horror term, but do you remember when I was talking to you about Hereditary and how there's that scene where he's in class and his hand shoots up and half his face like freezes?
Yep.
That scene is horrifying to me because that's something that I fear, really. Like, I've had times where I think it is an anxiety thing where I'm out with people and I'm scared about what if I were to do that randomly, and it's like a real fear of mine. And so I think there's something to that of, in horror, using those types of things that you're like, I can totally picture myself being there, and what if that happened, because that's a real anxiety of mine.
And I think that's when horror is the scariest, right? When it's personal, right?
Yeah.
When you actually see your actual fear come to visualization, you're like, oh, one, I'm not the only person thinking that. Two, wow, that's what it'll look like if it happens. And I think that's obviously the scariest part of it.
Yes, exactly. And I think too, they did such a good job. Everyone on this project did such a good job of making it feel real, so that when, and this is jumping the gun a little bit, I have a lot of other stuff I want to talk to you about before this, but this plays into what we're talking about. When the first act of physical violence happened, my adrenaline shot up because it felt like I was like, oh my gosh, that's what it would feel like to shoot your friend. Like, in that situation, can you imagine you're at a dinner party and suddenly, you've had this plan, you're in a cult, but then there's no going back. That feeling of no going back, they've actually just shot someone. So they poisoned the first friend, right? Which is also, I want to talk about the different elements of types of violence in this movie, which is very interesting. But the first time that he shoots someone, and everyone, and just imagine what that would be like if you're in a group of friends and that happened. That feeling of I don't know what I'm trying to describe, but you're kind of like, there's just no going back from that moment. And it felt so real, which to me is like a huge indication that whoever made this movie was very, very good at what they were doing, Yeah.
And I feel like the interesting thing for me was, I feel like there was about 1,000 red flags that built up before that happened too. So I feel like that once you would have heard, like, if you were in that accident situation, once you would have even heard that gunshot sound, I think the first thing your mind would have went with was, oh, I should have left earlier. And then it would have been like, oh, I'm in a lot of danger now. I've like, do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that would just be such a game changer in this movie.
And Joel, this brings me to the main question that I think everyone should ask themselves. This should be the question of this movie, is at what point, if you were in this, would you have left? I think everyone needs to answer that question. I have my answer. I wrote it down, and I want to ask you first.
Oh, wow. What a great question.
If you were a friend in this dinner party, what point would you have been like, I'm going to go?
Oh, wow.
If any.
Yeah, I think I don't think I would have showed, but if number one, because it's my neighbor.
Friends.
Yeah.
This is why we're friends.
I would have not showed. I feel like I would have gotten weird vibes at around this. I think the slap, if I was Will, because there's different people that had different perspectives. But if I was Will, the moment would have been the slap. But that video that they showed too, I'd be like, oh, this is a cult. I think I have to go home. And I would try to get out of there, really, because that video that they showed, which, fair enough, there are circles where that video could have been showed in a way of, this is just kind of what I believe. This is how I got through grief. This is a very like understanding thing. But there was enough things that led up to that video that I would have been like, something's going on here that's not feeling right. Yeah. What's your answer?
Okay, so mine is so we have to talk about Pruitt, of course. We have to talk about Pruitt.
Yes.
Okay. oh my God. I kept being like, this guy is so fucking scary. And I read that they actually wrote that role for that actor, eh? I read that.
I saw that too.
Yeah.
He is, I feel like it's funny because he looks like just like an average looking guy, but at the same time, you might as well have had like a horror movie monster just there. Cause I'm like, the size of him and everything, he was horrifying for that role.
Let's talk about that, because honestly, also the other thing I noticed about Pruitt is that their placement of him in every shot is so fucking scary. He's always like right on the edge of the shot, or in a place, and he's always moving. I was going to talk about this too. They shot it kind of like a play almost, where everyone's kind of moving around all the time during the shots.
I had a very similar note to that. It felt like there was a fluidity to the story, right? Like it actually felt like an actual party. People kept coming in, and but like a play, that's explains that even better. But I thought it was like shot beautifully that way, because you never knew really what to focus on. And I feel like if you watch this movie like 30 different times, you'll focus on different things.
I absolutely agree. And I think that they did that on purpose. And I love when movies do that, because I just think, I don't know, I love when they do that. But so Pruitt, if you notice, he's always in a really scary position where you're like, you don't know what that guy's going to do next, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so my answer to when I would leave the dinner party is when Pruitt starts talking about how he killed his wife.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the part for me. That's the part for me where I was like, okay, I would literally be like, I'm just going to go to the bathroom. And then I would, because I thought about this quite deeply. I would be like, I'm going to go to the bathroom and go to the bathroom and then come back and quietly like slip the key, like turn the key, and they'd be like, where are you going? And I'd be like, sorry, my mom just called, I gotta go. And then I'd like race out, because we also need to talk about that someone did try to leave.
That's right. Claire is the character's name. Maria Delfino is the actor.
Love Maria Delfino. She did great. Every actor in this movie
was so perfectly casted.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. But I felt like her leaving, her deciding to go when she decided to go was the most adult decision I've seen in a movie. That's the best way to describe it. It was a very adult decision. It's like, this has gotten weird. My friends are making out, like my married friends are making out.
Absolutely.
I just brought out Coke. I feel like and we're talking about like this, it's gotten too weird. I gotta go. Like, don't get me wrong. There's parties where all things are applicable and definitely appropriate. Not to say this, not to shame anyone to say this is inappropriate. I'm just saying in this room is the strain, like it was too weird for the vibe of that room. Because there's parties where I could stay with those situations. There's definitely parties I could leave with those situations.
Totally. And I just love that, they start talking about like giving each other blowjobs, and she's like, I'm gonna go.
I related to her so much.
Different strokes for different folks, you know. And she went, but so do you know that she is dead? Like that he killed her.
He had to, like, I assume he did.
I read, so apparently the commentary, they say that like, because it's never really explicitly shown in the movie, but apparently there's a scene that they shot that shows her dying that they cut from the final one.
Okay. And, I think it was better without showing it, because I assumed that she died, but it was better that without showing it.
I was really hoping that she didn't, though, honestly. I thought maybe she got away. Oh, but fucking Pruitt, man. Fucking Pruitt. He goes, that's the pull quote for this for me. Because he's so good at being scary. I would agree. Like, honestly, if I were to like pick who is the scariest or what the scariest piece of this movie would be, it would be Pruitt.
Oh, hands down. Hands down. Not every horror movie or thriller has a monster in it, but I'd say Pruitt would be the closest thing to a horror movie monster. And what's scary is he's just a very average looking guy, but he just was a force. And that story, and a guy that never really got over the violence of what he did to his wife. Like he was always that violent person and never really changed being that person.
I know. There's so much to unpack with that, because when he tells the story, it's so interesting, you know, because I think it speaks to how someone can say all the right things, but you still get a bad feeling. And that's like important to listen to as well, because if you listen to what he says, it's actually quite true. Like if you had a friend who had a horrible accident like that, you'd want to believe in redemption and that they can get better or change. But so the thing I wanted to talk about is how violently they killed they're friends, you know?
Yes.
So Eden on the one hand, and I think that there is a difference, like Eden on the one, not saying it's ever okay, obviously, but it's so interesting how it felt like Pruitt and David, dude, but they really, when the poisoning went south, they were very much like gung-ho about killing them in very violent ways.
It's like a switch flipped in their heads, right?
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting and strange, like really strange. There's a scene where David like jumps off a balcony to kill their one friend, the friend whose partner isn't there. I forget his name.
Not Miguel, right?
No, not Miguel. But anyway, he like David jumps off and he's like stabs his friend.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what the hell?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And I also thought, I liked how Pruitt's, with the violence of who Pruitt was, I thought the violence that of how he died really matched really went along with his character's arc, I thought.
Oh God, yeah. And Kira, that's her name, right?
Yes. That's the girlfriend.
I fucking love Kira. Kira's dope. Like, honestly, can you imagine being the partner to go into that?
That's just like, again, my nightmare situation. That's
and she does it. Like, she does it. She saves the day.
How did you feel about I gotta find the boyfriend's name that showed up late after that blow up? I thought that was the worst situation. How crazy would you have felt? I'm like, that would not make you feel good. You've been gaslit the whole time, and then the guy shows up. I was like, after that blow up, because it's so awkward at that table, that has to be one of the scariest horror movie scenes I've seen in a while for who I am as a person.
I love that. I love that it's so triggering for you. That
actually is going to be like, because I could picture myself being the person to blow up like that. Like, that is 100% something I would do. Like, I'm like, no, this isn't right. No one's listening to me. And I've been trying to be subtle and nice about it, but it's been weird. And then I could see myself blowing up like that. And then the person walking through the door is my sort of situation that would happen to me. And I'm like, we have to go now.
I know. And I also loved the Choi story of like, because that thread lasts a really long time. It starts at the beginning where, God, this movie is so good. Like, because it starts at the beginning and you're like, oh, that's fucking weird. Why isn't Choi there? You know? Yeah. And it lasts. And then there's that penultimate thing where he's like, Choi called me, dude. Like, I had the phone call. And then he walks in the door. And so you are always kind of like, is nothing going to happen? Like, is this dinner party fine? You know?
It's that pulled the rug from underneath my feet so much. And just because the subtle hints of really, I feel like that if it was a horror movie, how it would work out as opposed to a brilliantly done thriller like this, if it was a horror movie, Choi would have been dead. And that's what I think the setup is in your head. You feel like you feel like Will would find Choi's body, and that would be the thing. And that's when things would go off. In a typical horror movie, I feel like that's how that would work out. But the awkwardness of Choi actually walking in the door and it just being a misunderstanding to me is 10 times scarier than it being Saw. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they would have found Choi's body hung up, and I would be like, oh, that's, no matter how violent it was, I would be like, oh, that's, I don't like that. But if they would have shown, but having Choi show up late and like coming in, kissing his girlfriend, be like, hey, sorry, I'm late. And everyone kind of confirming that Choi is always kind of late, but everything about that just worked out so well.
Can you tell me, so first of all, I'm the type of viewer who I probably will never watch Saw, I don't think. Can you tell me the difference between like a thriller and a horror?
There's a lot of schools of thoughts on like what makes a thriller versus a horror, but if you're talking about like what the difference between say Saw and this would be, it would just be like the measure of violence would definitely be a difference, would switch us from a thriller to a horror. Like, if this movie to switch from a thriller to a horror, there would just have to be a lot more elements of just dread going into this. And this one was built more along the story as well as the dramatic impact, as opposed to the actual like dread and fearfulness of it, which a lot of films like Silence of the Lambs would be an example that has been called a thriller. But there is some films in the horror landscape as well, like Get Out. People were calling, a lot of people in the school of thought called Get Out a psychological thriller. And I wildly disagree with that. I think Get Out's a horror film.
Okay, can you tell me why? Tell me why.
I think Get Out's a horror film because a lot of the things that are in it, one, are work outside of it being a possibility, right? You can't actually do the brain surgery sort of situation and put someone else's brain in someone else's body. But also the build-up, even the score and everything about it was done like a horror film. And I think that Jordan Peele is making a horror film. Jordan Peele has said he was making a horror film.
Right.
But again, a lot of people within the horror landscape disagree with that for whatever reason.
I think the piece that to me is the most important from my perspective is what Jordan Peele said it is. Yeah. Because he made it, that's kind of where I sit on that, probably. But that's interesting what you said about the score, because the music in this movie is also really on point, I found.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Like I found that it scared the shit out of me, the music that or I don't even know it's music, but the way they used sound in this movie, I think also in terms of whether you call them thrillers or horror movies, is a huge piece. Like if the music is off in a movie, you can definitely tell. It's really strange. And it's kind of, I find it's funny as someone who watches movies but isn't really educated in movies, you take a lot of things for granted. So if they're done well, you don't notice them, for example, right? And I've watched, I forget which movie it is, which is probably good because I don't want to drag movies, but there was a movie I watched and the music was just off. Like it wasn't on point. It was kind of just timed off and maybe a little too loud or something like that. But it completely took you out of the experience. Whereas when music is done well, like it is in this movie, it's like, it makes it so much more scary.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of that comes down to, like after the film, right? A lot of the production can come down to them choosing outside of the director. For instance, I had a kind of conversation on music on one of my earlier podcasts about Zack Snyder's film Dawn of the Dead. And that director, Zack Snyder, he chooses a lot of his music for the films. And his films are a lot more action-packed, sort of like horror or action-packed superhero films. But with him choosing the music, it does change the tone of the movie. And it's a creative thing that producers don't usually like. And especially with Dawn of the Dead, it was his directorial debut and he chose the music.
It's so important though.
And if you watch the movie, it's the music in it is like so perfectly done and so weird and so awesome. And it changes.
I find that about Taika Waititi's movies. I feel that way about Taika Waititi's movies. Like I feel like his choice of songs gives it a really distinct tone that's totally makes it so fun to watch.
Oh, 100%.
I don't know. And again, I'm not in the industry, so I don't know how much of that is his choice, but I really feel like if I were to make a movie, music and having certain songs at certain points is fucking so enjoyable as an audience member. Like Booksmart did that. Do you remember Booksmart? Like
Love Booksmart. Yeah.
I don't know if Olivia Wilde was making those calls, but I found that the choice of music for that movie really set the tone for what that movie was,
I feel like they're really getting a handle of it now, more so than if you watch movies even like 5 years ago.
It's getting trendy now, eh?
Yeah, even the trailers, right, for movies. Like, do you remember the trailer for Us? Do you remember seeing that trailer where they put this on?
I'm sure I saw it, but I can't remember. Tell me.
Okay, so in the trailer for Us, and I'll put this in the show notes as well, they have the song I Got Five on it, which is like a great rap song.
Yeah,
and they slow it down. I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've seen for a trailer. I was like, this is
I watched that trailer over and over because I watched it.
I was like, this is a cool.
Oh my gosh, dude, that was genius.
Oh yeah, that changed trailers. Yeah, I think so. And this song was in the movie too. Like that changed. That's going to change trailers forever. Like, and I've already started to see that slowed down song is like really starting to become more popular in trailers. But I love that.
That's the funny thing, when there's a trailblazer who does it, and then everyone loves it, and then people copy it. It doesn't feel the same,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
who do you think? Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. You were saying, who do you think?
I was just going to ask, who do you think is which movie do you kind of credit making that first jump into using, I don't know what kind of word we want to use for using that, like not funky, but music that's changes the tone in that way. It's like,
oh, like the slow down tone.
Slow down. So Jordan Peele did that, but then also like I wonder if Shaun of the Dead was one of the first ones, like pairing action movies with like I noticed Guardians of the Galaxy did that in a big way. I don't know if you
yeah, it's called like needle dropping, but I'm not sure who the first person was, but now it's just like you see it in like even like Thor Ragnarok, right? Like where or even like Marvel movies love to do it. Marvel movies just love to do it.
But they didn't before. They didn't before. Like that's a distinct change if you watch the different, do you know what I mean? Like
Guardians was probably the first. That's a hard argument actually. Because I'd say Iron Man 2, maybe.
Yeah. I think it's Guardians.
No, Iron Man 1. Iron Man 1. It's Iron Man 1 because which is like kind of the first of it, but like Iron Man 1 has when he first puts on the Iron Man suit in the cave, and I think that's where I'm gonna get crucified in the comments by MCU fans, but I think that's where it first where I first remember it actually happening. I'll put that scene in the show notes too.
I would love for people who like have a theory about where it started, because I think it makes it so much more fun. And it's like it's so interesting when things like that happen where whoever did it first probably had to fight to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when they realized that everyone fucking loved it, they were like, oh shit, we're all going to do this now.
That is a good question. I'm going to ask that on my social media for West Coast Train to see if I can get an answer. Because I'm sure everyone's going to give me different examples and everything. And I will definitely get back to you on that one because I'm not sure. And I really want to know now.
Yeah. Tell me if you have any answers, and maybe nobody is going to be completely right, but we'll see.
Some historian's going to give me like a history lesson on where it first happened. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I know that we're going off topic and we don't have to do this now, but I do want to hear about some of your hot takes about I don't know, you were telling me you had some hot takes, so whenever we can talk about that, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so it's more so to do with, and this is fine to talk on here because this movie has a lot of gaslighting, and I feel like my hot takes are to do with gaslighting, right? So so what I was going to bring up is, and this is, I'm not going to say the names of the people, but I feel like that what we're getting a lot of right now as an audience of human beings from the celebrity world is a lot of gaslighting in the same way, where they'll do something wrong and they'll be like, oh no, that's actually, and they'll apologize for the wrong thing, which is something we've talked about before. And I feel like this movie did kind of that same masterclass. I felt like it's a very much, I don't want to say just put it as a location, but this movie specialized in like pointing out that it was a very Los Angeles thing to do. And it kind of feels like that's the sort of party that this was set in was kind of like a West Coast kind of vibe sort of thing. And I feel like that's what we're getting now. I feel like the whole world has kind of been put into this kind of like a airy fairy kind of West Coast thing where someone can do something wrong and then try to trick you into thinking they didn't. And that's kind of where as far as what I was going to talk to you about was just gaslighting in general.
I love that you brought that up because I love when people bring things up that you didn't expect but are like completely pertinent to your life. Gaslighting, I guess all I can do is speak from my experience, but gaslighting I think has been around for a really fucking long time. And it's interesting that it's getting so much attention now that we have a word for what it is, because it's really insidious. So I think gaslighting especially happens in relationships. It can happen. And so part of like an emotionally abusive relationship, for example, is gaslighting, but there was no real word for it before. So I think it's been happening to a lot of fucking people. And it's such a, I don't know if you've gone through this or not, but when you're in a relationship with someone who gaslights you, it leads you to really start to question everything about your reality when it's constant. And I think I don't want to make assumptions about gender, but I guess all I can say is I was in a relationship with a man and it was emotionally abusive and he gaslighted me all the time. And it led me to kind of lose my sense of self completely because he would do something that was like objectively wrong. And when I'd say, hey, you did this, it's objectively wrong, he would gaslight me and spin it in a way that made me like question, if you're good at gaslighting, you can convince someone that what they're seeing isn't actually happening. And I think that's extremely dangerous. But I would say, honestly, Joel, I think it's pervasive. I really do. Like, I think there's a reason why everyone's talking about gaslighting. And it's really interesting because I wonder if the people who do it, because like you said, I think what I'm hearing you say is a lot of people who are apologizing for things, they're gaslighting people, is because maybe they've never really learned to apologize for something, or they've never really learned to empathize with people or not. I don't know.
It's interesting. And I think that a lot of it has to come down to like the power dynamics in the situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel that now we're getting it on a global scale. I feel like that we're getting gaslit from like people, but also like from the media, from everything, that now it's just, it feels like you don't escape it, right? Like, apologies here about that, that you were gaslit in that situation, but I feel like that even outside of that situation, right? Like you'd like even leaving that relationship, but you'll see it everywhere else, right? Like when you have that feeling, you'll see it everywhere else. You'll know it when you're watching something else, and you'll know, do you know what I mean? When you're like watching like not necessarily like a news story, but you're watching a story on anything, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. It's making me feel weird for feeling that way. And it becomes like there's no real escape from being gaslit in the modern world now, in a sense.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it brings up like an interesting conversation about reality versus words, and that they're distinctly different. I've been thinking about this a lot in my own life, of words are a mechanism that humans came up with to describe reality, not the other way around. And I find it really interesting now, people are realizing like, oh, hang on, we have reality. If you're doing something in reality that's wrong, I don't really care if you can spin it and try to gaslight me and say like, oh, I'm crazy, or this is strange. Like, I hope that people are learning to like look at the experiences of people and listen to the experiences of people, rather than listening to like the spin on why it's okay or this kind of thing. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do know what you're trying to say. And it's weird because I feel like we have a lot more mediums to have these conversations, and hopefully people can relate and get their own perspectives from their own perspectives from other people's experiences.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I'm kind of hoping, like with like, because now we do have so many mediums, but like I said, it feels like it gives the world more ways to gaslight everybody, in a sense. So like it works out. They're like, hey, I can hear a story that I can relate to. I can take from experience from that and like get out of the relationship I'm in, or stop listening to the thing that's gaslighting me. But at the same time, you hear that like one way, but then you get information another way, for instance, social media or whatever, that's kind of getting you to think you're crazy in a different way. And it's a weird time to be alive.
It is a weird time to be alive, but I hope that everyone is starting to realize, like, I don't know, that the thing that you trust above all are kind of like, I just want people to respond to suffering a little bit more, and think about like, if you're ever talking about someone, especially with the like talking about people making apologies, for example, it's not really about like, we're all human and we deserve benefit of the doubt, but if they're apologizing for something that has caused harm or suffering, I think it's important for people to respond to the suffering first. So for example, like we've talked about like this whole thing with comedy, like a lot of people in comedy like coming out and making apologies about how they've treated women, for example. I just wish that people maybe more took time to think about how it would feel to be the woman that had those things done to them, instead of going straight to like the intellectualizing, making it logical. Like we've talked about this, Joel, where it's like this huge focus on like, is it legal? Is it legal? Was it legal or not? And it's like, maybe it's legal, but if someone's telling you like, this fucked my life up, I wish that people would focus more on like responding to that. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do. And I feel like, a lot of the gray areas, right? So like a lot of people are like, oh, it's like, it doesn't matter though, it's legal. I'm like, yeah, but that person's like traumatized. Like, okay.
Because we're always learning, right? Like that's the thing, like we can learn and get better. I joke about this with my friend, like we were making a joke about how there's so many songs that are like, she was 17, you know what I mean, or like she had braces, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then really focusing on like how old she was.
Yeah.
And then being like, you know what that means, guys, don't you? She was hot. And it's like, what are you talking about? Why is that such a theme in music for being like, she was barely legal?
See, and again, that feels like it's immediate gaslighting us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I think it's good to talk about for sure. I think it's really good to talk about. And again, I'm just going to say, always when in doubt, just focus on who has been harmed and what they're trying to convey to you about their pain. Just listen to that, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it feels like, and it's interesting that like this conversation came like sparked from this movie, but this movie feels like that, right? That's what it felt like. It just felt like the whole time that now it feels like I'm Will. Like I feel like everyone can relate to Will's character the entire time. That's basically the audience perspective, that just everyone just not really listening to him, and his pain was very fascinating to watch. And the slow, and I feel like he did everything right, which was what really made me feel uncomfortable, is that like he was doing everything right. He was like really calm. He was very nice. He was very polite. He tried to understand from the different perspective. He was defending people from a different perspective. But and his friends were kind of shady, which really bothered me.
Were his friends okay? First of all, beautiful segue, Joel. You are such an artist. That was a wonderful segue. I thought his friends were shady. Do you agree? What were your thoughts on the friendship dynamic?
Incredibly shady. I thought the part where the one that drove me insane, maybe this would have been the part where I would have left, when he took the pill and showed it to his friend that's a doctor and said, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. Granted, okay, sure, he snooped around the person's house. Yes, I'll agree with that that's wrong. He felt weird about the situation, but he wanted to know what was going on with the pill there. And then his friend kind of ratted him out in a joking way to the guy. I was like, I would have gone home. I'm like, that's a friends off situation, because the awkwardness of that would kill me. So I have to go home.
You would have stuck it out pretty long then, eh? Well, because also I feel like you got integrity, Joel, and I feel like you would be, because from his perspective, I think he's concerned about Eden.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And I think that that's a big reason why he didn't leave. From my perspective, like Kira, if I were Kira, I'd be like, dude, I'm gone.
Yep.
So I thought she was a really compassionate person, but because I think that a lot of the reason why he stayed so long is because he was, man, I related to this movie a little too hard, but he I think that he was worried about Eden, and that's why he stayed, because he was like, I need to get to the bottom of what's going on.
I feel like he was worried about Eden, Kira was worried about him, and then that's about where all the empathy in the movie was. Everyone else was in it for themselves except for those situations. Like,
I agree. I thought, but didn't that make it a little relatable? I don't know if other people would have better, more solid friend groups than me, but I've had friend groups where you are you're not strangers, but you're not close enough to be real with each other,
Yeah. And how do you think it's going to be after the pandemic? I feel like everyone's going to be like this, because they've just been texts. I think it's going to be a tough social go, not to be a pessimist for anyone listening to this.
That's okay.
But I feel like it's going to be a tough social go for a little while when everyone gets back, because you've been isolated really, apart from work situations and going to the grocery store realistically. Mm-hmm. So you've just been talking to people over the phone or Zoom calls, so you haven't seen your friends as much, so it's hard to really catch up. And then when you do catch up, you're excited and you just tell them a lot of the times about surface things. So I feel like when you actually get these situations like a dinner party like this, it's gonna be hard for people to pivot back into actually, this is an actual other person. They've got other stuff going on. Not to say I don't believe these things for my friends who I really do love, but it's weird to take someone away from a social situation for so long in a weird thing that everyone's going through the same thing, and then put them back, and which I think happened here with grief. So I think taking Will out of his friend group and taking all his friends away, they all kind of didn't really know how to talk to him about his grief. And
it was like 2 years, right?
It's 2 years, yeah, which is a weird amount of time. It's not 10 years, but there's a lot of catch up. It's 2 years, and you can tell they've been talking to each other a little bit, but things have happened between them. There was no real animosity, but they became strangers. So everyone was kind of on edge on the becoming strangers part.
Right. Everyone probably felt like guilty to a certain degree. They knew they weren't there enough. And interestingly, they were all there for the trauma.
Yes.
They were all there when it happened.
Yeah.
But yeah. I don't know, Joel. I feel like I have a bit of a different perspective about COVID, like after COVID, because I guess I'm certainly a pessimist, almost to a clinical degree. Actually, to a clinical degree. So this is strange that I'm saying this, but in my mind, COVID has kind of like stripped back this sense of like, I just feel like before COVID, people were, and this is why I have felt like an outsider like for so long, is people are really good at kind of focusing on the light stuff in a way that I don't really understand. So the surface stuff, like you said, and I feel like COVID maybe stripped that back and caused people to have to kind of pay attention to the fact that that is surface stuff. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, maybe when people start getting together again, they'll get together they'll connect in a more real way. But I don't know if that's just naive.
Oh, I like that. I hope so. That sounds better. I like that. That sounds like a better way to look at it than
oh, whatever.
No, like honestly, I do like that though. I feel like that's a better way to look at it than like because what I'm saying is just that like, oh, people are just going to be weird when they get back together. But you're saying there's more of a connection because people are going to realize that they didn't have what they lost realistically for that time they were apart. So I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we'll have to see. I'm really hoping your way is the way it goes though. We kind of go into like a Roaring 20s sort of style of.
Yeah, but who was we've talked about this, who was the Roaring 20s really good for, truly?
Yeah, honestly, it wasn't good for everyone.
Honestly, I don't understand. I told you this before. I just don't understand it. But I don't want to alienate your viewers. There's one viewer who's like, I love the Roaring 20s. I'm a huge advocate for the Roaring 20s. I can't believe it.
My one like historian viewer that's been listening to this, like, you know what? I'm not listening to this anymore.
A really fervent cosplayer about the Roaring 20s who's so mad at you. He's so mad.
Just takes off his monocle, throws it on the ground. He's just furious. Like, you know what?
Stamps on his monocle. He shatters the monocle. He's like,
I'm never.
Oh, yeah. I want to read through my notes because I have more things that I wanted to talk to you about. Oh, I wanted to ask you, Joel, about what you thought about that scene where they focus on their, the weird, I shouldn't say weird because I'm weird, the friend that they have, the friend who's a stranger to other people, she's from the cult.
Oh, right. Oh, I can't believe we haven't talked about her. I'm going to find out.
I wanted to talk about her because there's a scene that I wanted to ask you about, like, why do you think they filmed that scene of when she's in the room making faces of her at herself in the mirror?
Sadie, right?
I think it's Sadie. I'm looking through my notes, but I can't find it.
Sadie.
It's Sadie, yeah.
Yeah. So I found Sadie to be a different version of Pruitt in a sense that like, but it was interesting with her. She really wanted to be part of a community. And I really do feel like that, again, these people were all gaslit to be part of this cult. It could seem like they all went through grief. The thing with Sadie that actually I didn't like was we didn't hear what Sadie went through.
I agree. I
didn't like that at all. Now looking back, Sadie was just kind of there. They kind of just gave you the impression that she was unhinged and wanted to fit in, but they didn't really go into what happened to Sadie before to make her like that. And I would have liked to know what her backstory is because you feel kind of sorry for Sadie. Like she felt like she was completely tricked and gaslit from like the leader of the cult and from the people of the cult too. I feel like she got used a lot from the cult.
Absolutely did.
Yeah.
Absolutely she did. Yeah. And Sadie's been through some shit.
Yeah. Even within the cult where they were all seeming to be like all loving and nice, but she said, oh, they would just hurt me and you can hurt me if you want to. I'm like, What did
Yeah.
they do to you when they were
Yeah,
like,
it felt like she's been through maybe sexual trauma, this kind of thing. Like Sadie, and you're right, it kind of did feel a little bit like maybe they used her as a, I don't know, you can tell me how to say this, but like maybe like a device, like a, I just wasn't, I didn't fully know what they were doing with Sadie, you know?
yeah, and it looked like what my impression of her as a character was. Maybe it did work out that she was kind of an unknown, but one my impression that I got from her was that she really just wanted a family, really just wanted to be around family and wanted to be included in things. And
You're right.
even within this group, I felt like she got excluded a lot, but
Yeah.
any type of inclusion they did give her, she just dove in it. She was like, "Oh, okay, you're talking to me now. This is great. Like, oh, I'm being involved in this now. This is great." But it didn't feel genuine. And it felt like that was kind of a message of what her life was like prior to this. That's what I picked
That
up,
is
anyways.
that is such an interesting take. And I love that take. I really do. And it makes sense to me because I was also going to ask you about why she was so violent and having that. So your theory is interesting because so she just wanted a family. That means that she would do anything for her family, which is the cult. And so that makes sense that she got so angry when they kind of quote unquote messed up the plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
She goes completely off the wall and gets really, really violent, right? She like jumps on people and screaming and all this stuff.
Yeah,
And so
she's
through your lens, that makes sense because through her background, it's like she's very passionate about her family, right?
yeah, she's ride or die for that family. It really just
She's
showed like
right.
she
Yeah.
would do anything for that cult because I feel
Yeah.
like even though, from my basic understanding of her character, they definitely abused her. They definitely
Yeah.
like did
Me
some things
too.
to her. They definitely used her.
I
They
think so
definitely
too.
treated her terribly within this cult. And it feels like no one else, we don't really know about the cult, but it feels like no one else that was present that was in the cult was treated that way.
Yeah.
No one else was. It didn't seem like Pruitt was treated that way. Definitely didn't seem like Eden was treated that way from the cult, and it didn't
Yeah.
seem like Will was treated that way from the cult. So Sadie felt like the one outsider in that group that was like kind of abused and
I
used
think so too.
sexually. Yeah. So it just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love that you made that point because I was also going to bring up the shot of her being pantsless, like having, like she's in a shirt with no undies and no, I'm like dating myself saying undies, but no, no, just nude on the bottom, you know? And do you remember this scene? There's a scene
Yeah, I
where
do.
she's just in a t-shirt and she has no underwear. And I thought, I was wondering about what you thought about what they were trying to do with that. Because we've talked about before, I find it interesting the way that horror movies use nudity sometimes as horror. And I
Mm-hmm.
have a little, like some points of contention about that. So I just thought that was interesting, you know?
What I think, and this is just my assumption of what the director is going for to throw us all off, because going into this movie, we don't really know where it's going to end violently. If we go into this movie blind and we just assume that it's a weird dinner party, it
Yeah.
kind of seemed like it seemed originally like if you didn't think of the cult, that Sadie was like I don't know what the technical term would be or the proper term would be for a couple, like a third in a couple. Like they were part of like she was part of like a third in their couple. That's
Yeah.
how they first somewhat introduced her. And there was kind of that sexual
Right.
tension between the three of them. And that's how they first introduced her. So I think the pants, like her pantsless and her just kind of on what she said to Will outside, um, it just felt like that's where they were kind of going with that originally. Or not even originally, that's where they were kind of going with it, that she was kind of like a third in their group. And I think,
Yeah.
by the way, I think earlier I called, when I was talking about the call, I said Will and I meant David, but that's
Okay.
fix that. But
Okay.
yeah, I felt that she was kind of portrayed to be kind of a third. And then that was
Okay.
even kind of put out in the way of when she went outside and she was talking to Will and she said, like, you can fuck me if you like right here. And
Yeah.
it was kind of like just put out like she was kind of objectified in that way. And I think that kind
Mhm.
of just put credence to that to have her scene with no pants.
Yeah.
I'd assume.
Yeah. No, I think that that's true. And I think I'm glad we're talking about her because, yeah, it's a very interesting, um, I don't know, an interesting choice, I guess, but did kind of add to this sense of, again, like almost back to the theme of gaslighting, of they're treating her that way. But then, like cults, are just the fucking worst, man.
Yes.
But they're just the fucking worst because they take pieces of truth. You know, we all want to be understood. We all want to belong. We all feel like we don't sometimes, and cults kind of take that truth and then twist it so that they conflate things that aren't true and take it, like they mix it together, which just makes me so mad. Oh, it makes me so mad.
Oh, and this cult too, from our little understanding we know of this cult, is they're the lowest of the low. Everyone they preyed on, not saying that any cult's any much higher, but the manipulation of truth in this cult is one thing, but they also preyed specifically on people that went through trauma of losing somebody, which is like cults usually prey on, like, we'll prey on people that need community and that are kind of lost, a kind of a sadie situation. But this cult seemed to specifically prey on people that lost someone close to them, which was like it seems like the worst of the worst. And what was really interesting was somehow that seemed to work for so many people that lived in that same hilltop area.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Like, because are you talking about the last scene when they see all the lanterns?
Yeah. So everyone in that area did the same thing. That's why that was the last scene, right? But I'm man, that cult has a network. Like, did that happen? Like, that cult has an LA network, which is probably puts credence to like where we are as a society. That there'd be so many people that could be intertwined in a cult like that. Even within like a West Coast area like that. When I was watching this, I felt like this is something that could happen here.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like anyone listening, we're in Victoria, British Columbia. I felt like that's something that could happen in like the West Coast of like here. Like it really
Can you tell me why you think that?
I feel that people
imagine, okay, twist, I'm part of a cult.
Jeez, what a twist that would be.
Twist, I'm part of a cult and I come on this podcast like as an advocate for cults, and I'm like, I was very offended.
I would just pivot my questions. I would pivot my questions and continue. Interesting. So
it would make for good content. You're right.
I would ask what they got wrong. I would ask, I'd be like, hey, what did they get wrong in this movie? What do you think from your perspective?
See, this is why we're friends. You're just curious. Yeah, I love that. So, okay, but why do you think that it would thrive here?
Because I think that one thing, this is going to start with a compliment, to be honest with you. I think that one thing that the West Coast is known for is kind of the more open-mindedness, which isn't like it's not like too accurate true all the time, but with it being more of a liberal sort of society, with it being more of like kind of an open-minded society, people are willing to listen to these new fringe ideas with like a cult, right? In a more conservative like society or community, this sort of cult of going against what a lot of people believe wouldn't really have ground. So I feel like that in like a West Coast place like Victoria or Vancouver or anywhere out like this, I feel like this would have like more of a ground as opposed to like, no disrespect to like Red Deer, Alberta, but like I don't think this cult would have really been able to like stick in like a Red Deer, Alberta or like a
I mean, you're really going after Red Deer. I don't think there's
first place I could think of. First place I got there, Red Deer.
You're really going after
I've never even been there before. I don't know if you'll Red Deer like, but I just, as compliments Red Deer, I just think they'd be less likely to go in this sort of mass death cult like this. Okay. But yeah, I feel like it could happen more so here than. Yeah, because I based a lot on my social media. I've seen people post a lot of things from social media from a lot of causes where I'm like, what? That's not all right.
Yeah, okay, so this is the thing. You have your finger on the fucking pulse with that kind of stuff. I am not on social media and I haven't really been. I got Facebook 10 years ago and I was on it for like 6 months. I'm not plugged in. So it's just interesting to hear your perspective, seeing that piece, because that's a whole other part of it, right? Mm-hmm. And I hear what you're saying. I think you're probably right. I think that again, it goes back to like taking advantage of. Okay, I have a theory.
Okay.
I think that in society, the way I see it sometimes, and this could be absolutely wrong, and if it is, that's fine. But in society, there's different types of people, and the type of person who is like the trailblazer and like making change is very rare. But then what ends up happening is that there's like a tipping point where something becomes popular or mainstream.
Mhm.
And then there's a different type of person who all they want to do is conform. And so they latch on to the trailblazers' ideas. But then what inevitably starts happening is that everyone's ideas need to change. We need to progress. We need to learn. And so then it's interesting because the next trailblazer is a pariah. I feel like trailblazers are always pariahs until they become mainstream.
Very true.
Yeah. And people don't understand that. I don't understand how we don't get that yet, because we see it all the time where people who had trailblazing ideas when they were alive were treated like absolute garbage. And then we think, oh, that would never happen these days. And I'm like, it is for sure happening. Like,
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think a lot of us lack the self-awareness to be like, this is a cult. We just do, unfortunately, because we want to blend in, we want to conform, we want to belong. And I think, yeah, that's why people who are in cults say they never felt like they were in a cult. It didn't occur to them in those terms, you know?
Yeah. And I think that, I think that, like, especially now, I feel like after a pandemic, when people are going to really want to be a part of things, I feel like now would be like, if you, this isn't to give cult leaders ideas, but I feel like right now people would be more susceptible to like being part of, like, you know, being part of a conversation of what's new and trendy, as opposed to like breaking out from their own too. So I feel like we're in a bad time for it to happen too. That's again why I feel like this is an after pandemic movie, because I feel like if they release this movie now, after a pandemic, if they had made the movie about like people hadn't seen each other 2 years after the pandemic and the event happens, right, the same way, I think that we're gonna smash it. I think that just how where society is right now, it would work even better.
It's such an interesting take that you have there. And I think you're definitely right. It didn't occur to me. That's so true. Yeah.
Crazy times. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, I really liked seeing, this is kind of a change in topic, but I really loved seeing a father's love in a movie. And I thought this movie, like, I really enjoyed the tender moments of like Will and the love that he had for his kid.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
I do too. And I think that the way that it broke Will, I thought was really interesting in this movie too, because you saw like what he was like before, and then you saw the way that his mind broke, and by broke I mean like him emotionally. Like he was like so like very strong, and like when I say broke, I mean like he really just like was so heartbroken from like his son passing, and it really just did a number on him as a person. But I feel like the movie trope right away is to emotionally just show violence. And I think that he showed a lot of understanding, but then like he had a breaking point of the erasure of his son was really really not okay with him. That was the thing that was the most not okay with him throughout the whole movie.
You're right.
He wanted to feel those things. And I feel like that was such a different change for male characters in movies, because usually they just kind of bottle it all up and do something like cool and hip and violent in a movie. That's usually what happens. But this guy actually was okay to talk about it, and he would rather talk about it, but he hated the erasure of his son from everything. He wanted to see his room. He hated that erasure. And I loved that about Will's character in this. I thought it was really fascinating.
Yeah. I think also that Logan Marshall Green played him so beautifully, you know, of this, I don't know, he just played him really beautifully. He reminded me of like people in my life who are just such incredible people, but I don't know, I just really enjoyed seeing the tenderness piece, you know, where he's in bed with his son, he's crying. I don't see that a lot in movies where men are crying or emotional. And I think there just needs to be so much more of that, you know? I
wonder, and this is a generalization, but it's a somewhat of a good generalization, I suppose. I wonder if that has to do more so with the director, with Karyn Kusama directing it, because I feel like a male director, and this is where my generalization comes in, may have not been able to, or may have not shown that as much as I feel like a lot of women directors. I feel like a lot of directors that aren't cis men, like directing films, don't seem to capture that element. They just go, oh, this has happened. It's going to turn into some cool action scene instead. You know what I mean? That's where the emotional thing happens. Is like, oh, this will just make their character like a badass, cold-hearted, cool action hero that didn't feel anything. And I feel like that in this thriller, that Karyn Kusama really captured like what you're saying about Will, the emotional side of it, which really built to his character, which really made me feel empathetic towards his character. And
because also it's just real. Like men are tender, you know?
Absolutely.
Like, why do you think, Joel, like when you say that, I know it's a generalization, but why do you think that is the tendency? Like, why don't more potentially male directors, cis male directors do that, do you think?
Maybe it's to do with a lot of, here's another generalization, anecdotal generalization though. A lot of men maybe don't want to see that character.
Okay.
Because it's a reflection. And I think that might be it. Because I think that's a lot of the media is how it's marketed towards. I think it's kind of changing now, but I feel like a lot of media where it's marketed towards, guys don't have those emotional moments. It's usually based on more of the, like I said, the more of the action based and being like cool and slick and not showing emotions is where they also always really try to show things. But I feel like you can't really get as connected to the character unless you show these things. And the thing is, people always think that it's done like so overboard. They're always like, oh, I was too much of showing like, the sadness of somebody. But I thought that like they showed in this movie, you don't even have to show it that much. And it goes such a long way. There was just like little snippets of it. And it goes such a long way to thinking of the character.
Oh, no, it doesn't have to be gratuitous or anything. It's just, it's just true to life, I think.
Absolutely.
Like, I just want to see more art being just true to life, because it's helpful for everyone, I think. I really thought too, what you were saying about, I think a lot of this movie is the difference between how Eden responded to grief and Will.
Yes.
And I found it really interesting because in the end, my perception on it is that they both felt the same way. It was the way that they dealt completely differently with the way they felt, because there's a line that Will has that says, I've been waiting to die since my son died. And so he feels the same way that Eden did, but it manifested in a different way in his life than it did in hers. And I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that Eden, or at least what I was shown with Eden throughout the movie, is that she just wanted that pain to go away. She really wanted that pain to go away. Will was more okay with that pain staying because it meant that he still had part of his son. That's at least what I got from it.
Oh, that's so true.
Eden just wanted that pain to go away. And it kind of alluded, well, not alluded, but it showed you with her suicide attempt too, that like it just kind of seemed like she thought that this would be a way to get the pain to go away. And then the cult kind of just dove on her and was like, oh, no, this is the way to get the pain to go away, and took advantage of her. That's at least what I perceived from this film. But Will himself, though, it felt like he found a way to, he was never going to be okay. And how could you ever be okay with the loss of a child, right? Like how can you ever be okay? But like he was okay to grieve throughout the film, and it was okay to talk about it, like I mentioned. And yeah, I feel like a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was given comfort, and he was given a great partner in Kira that was able to like talk with him about it. And absolutely. I think that, and prop him up. And I feel that with Eden, what happened with her and David was that he didn't prop her up, as opposed to he kind of put his things with her things. And then on top of that, they were taken advantage of by this Dr. Joseph character who took advantage of their grief.
That's an interesting point. And so in your imagination, what do you think the dynamic between David and Eden was? Because we haven't really talked about that.
It's weird. There is a lot of relationships out there that are propped up by one thing. Now, whether that's a relationship where someone's had like, I'm going to openly say this is not a judgment to anyone's relationship. Let me just start by saying this. Whether or not a relationship is like propped up by like, just like a child, or if they have like something together, like a house together specifically, and their money is tied up, or like a religion together, and they just share that one thing. I feel that their relationship was propped up heavily on their grief, that they're connected to grief, and then this cult was the last thing that kind of connected it. And I feel like that's what this relationship was held up by, that if you removed one of those things, I feel like they're very different people. And was a problem between them. Because there's a lot of people that are in relationships that have no similarities whatsoever, but they'll have one thing that's holding up the relationship, and that's what'll keep them together. And I feel like, and sometimes that can work out. Not everyone has to be alike or to live a happy life or whatever. But I feel like in this situation, what was propping their relationship up was incredibly toxic and very dangerous.
Who do you think started them out with the cult? Do you think it was David, or do you think it was Eden?
Oh, that's a tough call.
Yeah.
That's a tough call. It feels like it was David.
I think that the movie's trying to suggest that it was David.
Yeah, I thought so too. And
that Eden is kind of in this state of, grief and depression, and so she was easily led.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's true or not, but.
Well, they kind of alluded that before this. Let's look at who they were before, right? And this has been a long podcast. I like it though.
Sorry,
No. Absolutely. I love this. Before this, it felt like David, before he got into cults, was not the best guy. They kind of alluded to that he was just.
When did they allude? Tell me more.
Well, they alluded to him, like he said that, like before, like I found this cult, I was like, they don't think they call it a cult. But before I found this group, I was before I found this cult. No, they kind of alluded that he said that in his own words that he was a coked up radio or music executive that was like really toxic.
I'm sorry, but that bit of you being like, before I found this cult is just getting me. Like, imagine he stands up in the middle of the scene, before I found this cult.
That'd be the best writing ever. Just like on the nose dialogue, before I found this cult.
We haven't even talked about our mutual love of comedy, but yes. Yeah, for sure. You're right. He said I was, he made that comment. I was a coked out music executive or whatever.
Yeah, and before this, Eden seemed like a very nice, like level-headed person that went through a very traumatic and terrible situation. David David and Pruitt almost alluded that, like, before this, they were bad people that got into a situation. Like, even Pruitt, like, I can't say, I was like, accidents happen, but he hit his wife. Like, I can't really justify saying accidents happened.
But also the way that he carries himself, just the way that he was into it. Like he was into it. He was like, I'll do it. And he didn't matter to him what the method was of the violence at all. He was like, I'm just going to do it. Like he was just into it. So I think that's I don't want to judge again. I do think people can change, but yeah, I mean, listen, that guy was not a good guy.
Pruitt was a monster. Like prior to hitting his wife there, like I feel like he had done some stuff before. Like that it didn't allude that it was his first time assaulting his wife.
Certainly did not seem that way to me. No.
It felt like that was just the time that she died. But like prior to that, it didn't feel like that, like it was the first time. Mm-hmm. Damn. But this can segue right into our comedy conversation. It feels like a lot of the time with the comedians or celebrities, because I don't want to fully generalize, but a lot of celebrities, it never feels like it's the first time when they're getting caught with something. And then their apologies never feel like they're not going to do it again.
I know.
That's a big issue.
This is the thing. It's usually a pattern. I don't understand. Yeah. I feel like people I don't know. It's hard, because I think, people have the same perceptions of me. And then we've talked about this. You go on like the YouTube video and then there's like thousands of comments that are completely supporting their shitty whatever. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, usually it's a pattern. It's not like they did that one thing and that's why it's happening. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just, the forgiveness that people are giving for certain celebrities just, I shouldn't say celebrities. It just really just, bothers me.
Are you going to name drop, Joel? I feel like that's risky.
No.
No. Are you going to dox people?
No. Just, no. But
we can do that at work, but not on the air.
Not for the No Stranger to our podcast. But I do feel like, it's really interesting. A lot of this movie just reminded me a lot of our conversations in that sense, that it just, I felt like the conversation at that game that they played.
Yeah.
I yeah, that one character leaving was actually just the funny thing is with that game, like that would actually probably be like a very like nice, fun game with friends. It went a little left a little early.
Right.
Really, really early.
Right.
But I feel like in like a different situation and you didn't tell your friends what movie it came from, you could play that game and have like a good open conversation about things. It just, that group would be a nightmare group to play with.
Absolutely.
Pruitt's story was, I think after you saw the video that they showed of the computer on the laptop, I think after that, I'm like, oh, things are going to go off the rails for anything else anyone in this group is going to say.
Well, I mean, I'm telling you, I wrote down that after Pruitt's monologue would be my time. I'd be like, okay, this is getting dark. I don't know this person.
Halfway into his monologue. Right? Like, I'm like, oh, this went bad. I'm like, halfway into his monologue.
Did they show the movie before or after his monologue? Do you remember?
They showed the movie before, I believe.
Yeah, so I don't even think I'll be honest, my limit was not the movie, it was Pruitt. So it's after that. I would still be like, okay, all right. So these are my friends and they're into this new thing. Okay. And then when Pruitt started talking, I'd be like, nope.
Yeah, I feel like the movie wouldn't set me off too much too, because I'd be like, oh, my friend actually lost her child and she seems like she's in a better place. If this helped her, I can sit through this. It's not for me. That's kind of fine. Okay, I can sit through this. Yeah. Pruitt would be, that's a red flag for me. Like, why are my friends with this guy? What's going on?
This guy's dark.
Drinking? Yeah.
Also, the thing I wanted to mention for people who have watched this movie was I really appreciated that scene of when the violence does start happening, and because I'm just telling you, the way they shot that scene really got to me. Because they all go silent and they're like, go, and they're trying to run out quietly. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was so smart, cinematically, as they say, because that's how it would happen. Like if you were in that situation and suddenly that started happening, your adrenaline would shoot up and you'd be like, let's get the fuck up, let's go. And then really, really quiet. So I really thought that was done very well, of showing how in that context, how you'd react.
It was very, very believable. Very, very believable. Because I feel like in most movies, it becomes like, oh, this average mild-mannered person becomes an action star. No one did that in this. There's like, oh, we need to get out of here. This is crazy.
Exactly.
And your mind would flip to, oh yeah, there's bars in all the windows. All the doors are locked.
Oh, I know. When he says there used to be garage and there's no garage, and Kira's like, oh my God, no,
I have a question actually, and I don't think they circled back to this, or maybe I missed it. Who came to the door? Somebody came to the door and like, oh yeah, no, wrong house. What was that about?
Oh, really?
Did they circle back to that?
I don't know. Wasn't that when Choi got there?
No, that was like way later. They thought it was Choi and it wasn't Choi. That was way earlier. They thought it was Choi and it wasn't Choi. Someone just came to knock on the door like, sorry, wrong house. Maybe that was just to show they were locking the door. But I felt like that was like, what? Is that going to come back?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember that part, but that's making me think, like, what was it?
Yeah.
What do you think? Maybe that was their friend? Was it after their friend left?
Before.
Like, I'm just wondering if that was maybe like they didn't cut that, but they because maybe their friend was injured and she was trying to get back to them.
No, it was before then. I think it was even before the video.
Okay.
It was like after the slap, before the video, and it was the first time that Will had told David. I keep getting their names mixed up. Yeah, it was first because those two guys look alike. It was the first time Will had told David about the door locking.
No, I don't know. I don't know what that is, but it's fascinating. I love when directors do stuff like that, or writers, because you think, oh, what do you think it was?
Yeah, I think it was to do with like to show the door was locked. To show that, like, because Will calls him out on that right after. He's like, hey, why are you locking the door?
Yeah.
This is because this one last thing here before we wrap up here. I think that Will and David looking alike was good. Here's why.
Yes.
Because I thought that like I don't know if this ever happened to you. This has happened to you before, when someone's like, hey, this is my new person I'm seeing, and the person looks just like their ex, is maybe one of the weirdest things ever. Like I think I'm getting pranked. I'm like, are you fucking this? They're identical. No? Okay, we're not gonna bring it up. And like no one brings it up, like they're twins. But I thought like in this, like it was the first, because usually it happens in movies, and I get mad. I'm like, Jesus Christ, is there more people in Hollywood than just white guys? Like you can cast other people. But this was done so well that I was like, oh, this is kind of supposed to be weird, right? They look like the same guy. They're both the same white guy with like beard and kind of longer hair. But like, I was like, okay, this kind of works out because I kind of can see that like that was, it added to the weirdness of the whole situation.
Yes. Well, and you're not wrong. Like I remember the first time I watched this movie, I couldn't remember who was who for like the whole first chunk of the movie. So like because now that I've seen it, I knew for sure who was different or whatever. But at the beginning, like I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, I can't remember who's Will and who's David, which I think is pretty brilliant.
Yeah, I think that like it was one of those things. I'm like, any other movie, I feel like they would have done it. Not even purposely. They would that's just how casting works. We casted everyone in all Hollywood.
Were for like hundreds of years.
For sure, right? Like we got everyone in Hollywood. We got two of the same guy. I'm like, all right, fair enough. Yeah. But in this, I thought they did it really well.
Yeah, I agree with that fully. And just to reiterate, Karyn Kusama, genius.
Yeah, please give her about 1,000 more movies. I really enjoy her work.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, to wrap up here, because this has been my longest podcast episode, and I'm actually really happy about it because we went over a lot of great things with a movie that I love that I really want more people to see. And I feel like that we didn't spoil it, even though we said some spoilers in it. But I feel like even if you watch the movie, like if you listen to this podcast and then watch the movie, it still works. You'll be able to like focus on a lot more things. Mm-hmm. So whichever order you choose to do this in, anyone listening, I think it'll work out for you. Anna, before I let you go, is there anything last you want to say to anyone else? You want to say goodbye?
I don't really have anything that I want to plug. I'm your notoriously casual movie going friend from work, so I actually have nothing to plug.
Is there anything people should be watching that you think that?
Okay, yeah, I'll tell you. I'm always watching something on loop. As we've mentioned before, I have kind of a thing about watching things over and over and over. And right now I'm watching Wellington Paranormal, which is a fantastic show, in my opinion. I fucking love that show. So I would definitely recommend that more people watch it. I know that it got, what's the word, Joel? It got brought on by HBO.
It got picked up by HBO.
Thank you, Joel. Thanks, Joel. So it got picked up by HBO. And so obviously other people feel the same, but if you haven't, and also What We Do in the Shadows, those are both shows spun off of Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi's work. So if you're a fan of them, you will definitely like these things. There are some incredibly talented writers on those projects, and you'll love it. You'll fucking love it. So that's all I have to say.
Perfect. I will put both those shows in the show notes. I've started watching them on Anna's recommendation. And now that I have a lot more, I almost said I had a lot more time, which would have been a lie. Now that I have a bit more time, I will be able to watch more of those shows. So I will get on those and I'll put those in the show notes as well.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me on. This was great. I had a great time.
Thank you for being on. And I want you to come back on so we can do a show on like New Zealand horror comedies.
Literally whenever you want and whatever you want to talk about, I am here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. To find me guys on social media, I'm at West Coast Strange on Instagram as well as Facebook. I will be posting more articles soon, as well as this podcast, which you're probably listening to because I posted about it. Anyways, everyone have a nice night, day, or wherever you are right now. And as always, be kind, watch more horror, and I'll see you guys later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.